This video is for business leaders who want a clear yet flexible career-long framework for success, no matter what challenges they face. So this is day 4 of Grit Week. So watch to the end of this video for bonus material on more techniques for staying on the path and a recommended video on reducing errors in judgment. So today's episode is brought to you by the letter P, the number 3, and alliteration. So essentially there's 3 categories here in terms of what we're doing, and those 3 categories are: first is to persist, as would be indicated here by the title. So persisting in this case, or persistence, is ways to stay on your path. And essentially the main thing here, or one of the fundamentals, is daily dominates. Anything daily is better than anything in any other frequency, because that's how habits are formed, and that is how you make continuous progress as well. Mostly matters most. And by that, what I mean is what you do 80% of the time matters far more than what you do 100% of the time, in that if you miss a day or for some reason you can't do something, thinking that perfection is what you need to be and then quitting is far more of a guarantee of failure or not staying on the path than saying, okay, this month, or for emergency reasons, or just because you're lazy, me too, I'm just as guilty as anybody else, you fall off the wagon, you can't do something. Mostly matters most. What you do 80% of the time or 75% of the time is far more important than what you do 100% of the time imperfectly, which is kind of the same thing in this case. So the main part there is it'll get you back on the path. If you do something, you forgive yourself, you express self-compassion and continue to do it, knowing it isn't perfect, but you do it most of the time, you will get most of the progress and most of the success from doing it 100% of the time. It won't be the same, but it will be pretty darn close. So the next one is to prioritize. Now, by prioritizing, I mean one next and only first thing. That is, you can only do one thing effectively at a time. This has been proven over and over again. I'm not going to get into it in this episode, but single tasking is the truth of your brain. Anything else is an inferior, lesser relative of doing one thing effectively at a time, which is about all your mind can effectively and efficiently focus on. So do that. Do only that thing, and do that thing first. Now, the second one, to keep you on the path to your grit, your determination, your perseverance, is pre-mortem. So a pre-mortem is something that Daniel Kahneman talks about, and he says you sort of future project, or time travel in a sense, into the idea, if in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, what we are doing now, what I am doing now, gave the best imaginable results. It was a fantastic, incredible success. What would that look like, and how would I know? What actions would I take to bring about that end? But, and here's the genius that most people fail to do because they're superstitious, or they believe in things like The Secret, and the secret of the secret is it's bullshit and people are gullible, to do something entirely different, and that is do the same thing. When you do the pre-mortem, you also do, what would it look like? What would be the worst possible outcome that could come from what we're doing now, what I'm doing now? Project forward 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years from now. What would the worst outcome look like? And what things would be most likely to lead to that outcome? So you're not just looking at the positive. The idea of ignoring the negative possibilities increases your chance of failure. It does not decrease them. Considering the roadblocks, so considering the best possible outcome and what steps might or causes might lead to that, and the worst possible outcome and what steps might lead to that, will give you a more 360-degree view of what actions, what beliefs, and what other things will not only keep you on the path most successfully, but most likely lead to the outcome you're hoping for. And then the third one in this category, and remember this is category 1, and that is the persist category, that is staying on the path you want to be on. And that is push. So they are prioritize, pre-mortem, and push. Alliteration, gotta love it. So this one really is push yourself. You can't really force others to be pushed, but you can try to inspire them to push themselves. You can push them, but it will not work. You will get pushed back. So you push them to challenge themselves, or you inspire them to challenge themselves and to continue along the path, but keep it in the Goldilocks challenging zone. That is, challenging enough to be real challenging, to be meaningful when you achieve it, or for them to achieve it, but also not so challenging and overwhelming that you quit. I can't do 10 of these shows a day, or I could with a staff, or I could for one day, but then I might quit for 2 weeks or be really stressed out and do a really poor job. I can do one every day, and that is significantly challenging, but not too challenging. That's a Goldilocks thing. So the next category, the second category, is pivot. So pivoting, what I think the best way to think of this here is more alliteration. Pivot to promising and or proximal related areas, and or when to pivot out or pivot criteria. I know that's like a Dr. Seuss sentence, but we're going to get to what that means exactly in just a moment. That is, when you're pivoting, that means obviously changing direction to things that are proximal, which is a word for near or closely related areas. So if you decide that the way you're doing it isn't working, and because you have pivot criteria, that is, at what point do I need to change my approach? What point do we need to change our approach to reach towards what we need? At X point, we need X amount of income. At X point, we need X amount of customers coming to us. We need to grow our audience by Y amount. We need to have so many viewers on our YouTube channel. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter, though you should relate it back to something you can do, which is called a process goal. That is a goal over which you have direct control, which leads to outcomes that you have no direct control over whatsoever. So at what point are you going to make your pivot criteria? Is it money? Is it time? By X time, you must have Y income, or you need to find an alternative source of income. That's one that I've had to entertain myself. My channel isn't moving along as fast as I want it to, so I was financially forced to look at to do some more teaching, and I'm actually kind of loving it because it's giving me inspiration, not only for this channel, but to be able to illustrate my principles once again. So you make criteria of when you may need to pivot if what you're currently doing doesn't work, even if it's to pivot within the same category along the exact same path, or whether you need to veer off that path. And the criteria and your specific situation will have to be determined as to what is the most appropriate kind of pivot to make. So let's call these pivot pointers. So the criteria can be in time, as we just talked about. So time-bound criteria. By this time, we need this result, or we need to pivot. By feelings. Feelings matter, and I'm not talking about being a crybaby. If you're really sensitive and you want everything to happen easily, you probably just shouldn't be an entrepreneur or a leader, because it's just too damn hard. Go get a job working for somebody else. That's by far the easiest way to make a living, whether you like it or not. You may not be happy, you may not have control, but you will find it to be the easiest way to make an income, though a capped and limited income, which is probably going to fall over time, relatively speaking. So look at your feelings, or the feelings of the people in your group. If you're so frustrated and hopeless that you're going to give up anyway, this might be a good time to pivot. So feelings matter and they can be used as indicators. If I feel like 10% of the time doing this, if I feel like no matter how determined I am, I still can't do it, or can I produce enough determination, enough inspiration to continue to do X, Y, or Z, whatever it happens to be? Look at your feelings. The next pivot pointer could be the process. This is similar to the time-based criteria for pivot pointers, but instead you're just saying, here's what we're going to do if this happens. This is an if, then, when kind of situation. If this happens, or when this happens, we or I will do this to continue on this path, even if I'm pivoting an approach, but continuing on the same path, or pivoting off my current path onto a different path. Have a process in place, and also a process in place to figure out your next steps based on the knowledge you have, based on the expertise you have, and circumstances. This is the one you can have no control over. That is, if the economy goes down, if there's a worldwide pandemic, if something completely outside of control changes our business, then you can go to your pivot pointer process and say, okay, we have invoked our process. Now, how does this process get us to where we need to go? Are we going to change direction? Are we going to stay in the direction but pivot the strategy? And the next one, which is actually kind of process and procedure, is kind of the same thing. So the next one is pivot procedure, and that is invoking or learning or training yourself and others at lateral thinking skills and the application thereof, so that you can say, okay, how can I create the processes? How can I be creative in problem solving? What do I know that I can move laterally, either to figure out a new category for myself? I spent a lot of time in product development, and I made exactly zero money in it because there's a lot of challenges in product development, mostly around the rigid process and thinking. It's ironic that a field that is primarily creative is associated with companies who are primarily uncreative and rigid in terms of the way they approach new product development, and, in a word, their overwhelming greed for wanting people to basically come to them only when they no longer need them, because the process and the product is already proven. So the next one is, and the final one in this category, category 2, is pull the trigger. That is, start, take action. So you're not going to want to stay in your lateral thinking skills or trying to manifest it with positive attitude. Once you've done these other steps, you need to pull the trigger and take action in that pivot, whatever action, obviously process goals, actions you can take, that your team can take within your level of control, which will head you in a different direction or into a different strategy. And the third one is perspective. And this is sort of, the order of these is very specific, because first of all, you just want to persevere if you can. But at some point, you have to have criteria of when, okay, we've been doing this 1 month, 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, to say, okay, this is not only not sustainable, but it's not working. And when you need to change or pivot is entirely up to you and your circumstances. I waited about 10 years before shifting out of product development for the time being. It's a pivot approach to the same end goal. So this is about changing your perspective, or looking at things from a different perspective or mindset, and looking at a different path, which could be, like in my case, to the same end. I went from product development, and that's where I want to end up, hopefully changing the world with environmental products. But the traditional product development path, the corporate product development path, at the very least, isn't working for me. Even though I had professional and successful coaches in it, it wasn't working using their process. Their process was, sad to say, highly ineffective, somewhere in the order of 1% to 10% successful. That is, 90 to 99% ineffective or failing to get product licenses, which was the approach that they took. So I instead want to use my neurocognitive leadership, this consultation business, to be in direct conversations, demonstrate my creative value and my inventiveness, my creativity through business consultation and my own lifelong study of success and what makes excellence and perseverance and things like this, and get into conversations to not only change lives starting at the top of the companies with leaders, but then also training their people, but also having access to these top leaders gives me the opportunity to talk to them about the bigger picture for me, which is the world-changing inventions like solar power stuff that's better than anything I've seen out there, including heliogen and other things like that. If you don't know what heliogen is, check it out. I'm not going to put anything in the description about that today. So then the next one is so you go to the same end. The other one could be an equivalent end. So it's not the same end goal, but a different goal, which is supported by the same skills or knowledge that you have. So business consulting, to me, I'm basically inventing solutions for businesses and systems to help people think better, prevent problems, and create superior solutions. To me, this is still just inventing, but it looks like from the outside that it is, in fact, applying the same skills in a different direction. So that goes back into the lateral thinking part. But I think what's important here, if you can possibly do it, is that the path you're taking is still equally meaningful. That is, you need timing, and in these two, you also want to have timing indicators, those pointers, let's call it pivot pointers, which we've already talked about, that the meaning is still there, and that hooks back into your feelings and stuff that you're saying, okay, this is still meaningful. If it's not meaningful and it's a challenging path, which I'm assuming it is, because most paths worth being on are challenging, if it's not meaningful, if it becomes only drudgery, only work, or only a paycheck, it is unlikely you will be interested in staying on that path, and that you will be able to deliver the kind of quality and commitment you need to succeed at all, let alone to succeed well and come up with excellent solutions and stuff. And so let's see here. And the last one is, well, I've already talked about it, the pivot pointers, the indicators, whether that be time or other criteria. Now, the next one is persist or pack it in. So this is actually the beginning of the category, or the three specific solutions that I'm offering for this category, brought to you by the number 3, persist or pack it in. This is about what I call strategic quitting. Quitting isn't something I will ever do easily, and it's taken me my life to get to that point. I'm essentially an expert at persistence because I've had so damn much practice. I've studied the topic extensively, and my experience, my background in psychology, and the research that I found, which is also extensive, deep, and long, all says the same thing. I'm doing it right. I've developed my own techniques, but there is such a thing as strategic quitting, when it's like, okay, this isn't working. I've spent 10 years doing it this way. I've learned that this path is ineffective. Let's find another one. Now you have to base this on your criteria and nobody else's. Now, the best example for me for this would be I'm on 241 days in a row producing shows with real quality content. The validation, the number of audience members, the number of subscribers is, in a word, fuck all. But people have said, well, aren't you being crazy? Isn't this a matter of insanity that is doing the same thing over and over with no success? It's like, well, my primary criteria of success is the ability to make 241 quality videos with better information than most experts out there about the areas that I have knowledge in. So 241 days in a row of videos doesn't, to me, sound like a failure. It's a tremendous success, in terms of content quality, content creation around scientifically validated principles and my own experience. So I'm a tremendous success in that respect. Your criteria or your company's criteria have to be yours and nobody else's, because there's always somebody who will tell you why you're wrong, as is the case for anybody who's pretty much done anything significant in history. Feel free to validate that. And then the next one is primary end goal. This is all about the destination. Now, you need to make your path towards that destination, whatever is what Jim Collins would call your vision. Your destination, I'm going to say, is the same as vision for the purpose of this talk anyway. Make your path less relevant to your original destination. If you're forced to change it, if you've decided to strategically quit or pivot, it can be less relevant, but it should be more or equally meaningful, because that's the only thing that's going to keep you on the path. That's the only thing that's going to really keep you going, even if you have to shift paths. Doing what we do as leaders, as entrepreneurs, is one of the hardest jobs in the world. It makes most other jobs and most other areas laughably easy. Because when we're trying to bring something unique, until enough people recognize it, you get that critical mass, nobody knows or everybody thinks it's wrong. So you have to have your clear end goal so that you know where it is, even if even your coaches, which is the case in my case too, doesn't really understand the value of being able to prove your own principles by doing a video a day for 1 year. I'm not just talking about it anymore. I've demonstrated it with publicly verifiable evidence that's on the net. And then the last one is prioritize. Now, this is very important, and this is inspired by Daniel Pink's book, Drive. So some more alliteration for you. Meaning over money, autonomy over autocracy, and purpose over profits. I hope that makes it obvious to you, but that prioritize meaning over money. Money is more likely to come if it's meaningful, because you'll stick with it long enough. Autonomy over autocracy. If you have to babysit everybody as a leader, or even if you have to babysit yourself in a sense, where you don't have the power to change things, you spend your time in bureaucracy rather than in productivity. And purpose over profits. Again, is it important? Do you think it makes a good difference in the world? If you don't, you probably won't stick with it. And mastery, autonomy, and meaning, or mastery, autonomy, and purpose, are what Daniel Pink's book Drive found to be the better scientific basis, that money means fuck all for most people in terms of their drive to advance in their stuff. Actually, I have to change that. I'm sorry. It's actually mastery, autonomy, and purpose in his case. And meaning and purpose are the same thing. So, oops. Mastery, meaning, autonomy, and purpose. I want to keep my threes, but mastery and meaning to me isn't the same as purpose, but they're pretty damn close. My mistake. But am I going to panic? Am I going to reshoot this show? Absolutely not. I have to balance an equilibrium between perfect presentation and fake perfection and productivity at a level of 1 show per day. So it's going to stay exactly as it is. I will clip the ends, and that's about it. So now we're to the bonus material. Thank you for watching this and that is more information on persist, pivot, and perspective on your path. So the next one is be actively ever evolving. The format that I used for this show today is different than I've ever used. It was both point form rather than verbatim, which I usually do. I started point form, I went to verbatim, now I'm going back to point form, and I need to find an equilibrium between keeping the length correct, speaking into the camera, speaking like a real human being, rather than just making a perfect but poorly and cardboard presentation of the material itself, which is boring and incongruent and comes across as inauthentic. So there's that. The video format and language changes now is what I just described. And another one, which is really critical because I do this and have for years, but did it while I did this episode, and that is to act immediately on ideas if you can, such as the ones I just described. I changed the writing format, though you can't see it, to make this easier semantically, cognitively for me to present this information quickly and naturally using my real speaking voice and my real presentation style. But I have to balance that against being a little wordy. So immediately act on ideas if you can. By applying them, you entrench them. If you can't, document if deferred to make doing easier in days to come. It's more alliteration for you. So that is, document the stuff. If you can't do it today, if you can't apply it, document it for further action later, but document in such a way that you don't have to go searching for it. What was I going to do? Literally put it into, whether it's a to-do list, or for me, it's usually the next episode or episodes to come, which I have a long list. Every time I have a new idea, I plug it into my episode list, because 365 takes work, creativity, and a rigorous documentation of ideas. When they're there, I document them or do them as though I will never see them again, just in case. Okay. And also, and finally, along the same lines, if you can't do them soon, that is, you can't do them immediately, or you can't do them soon and you document for that, document for distant days. That is, make it clear enough, give enough information that if in a month you look at it, you won't be confused. You won't go, well, I knew what I meant when I wrote that, but I can't tell what that meant now. This is an experience of mine, which has led me to changing the way I document, because it's very easy to say, it will be obvious to me in a month. And then you get there and you go, I have no idea what I'm talking about, and I'm the author. So you have to pay more attention to how you document. The next one is more on the persistent path. So this goes back to category 1 of this talk, which is plan and prepare to fail. This is to anticipate and solve problems and make solution processes. We talked about this in the pre-mortem. This is essentially more on that. Plan to succeed. So when you plan to succeed for your immediate next steps, the next thing, screw the one thing, the next thing is even simpler and more effective. Plan to succeed and anticipate that if you succeed at X, the closest step to now, or the closest step beyond your current step, what things will you need to do if you do succeed? What will be the next step? Do you need more staff? Do you need more training? Do you need to change your format and make your process more efficient? Know your next step after your next or immediate step. The other one is you need points of reference. This gets back to criteria, whether it's pivoting or simply knowing when your next step of anything is. You need to know, are you making progress? This doesn't have to be numerical. It can be qualitative. You are getting more watch time. You are getting more income. It's more important, and from an evolutionary perspective, your brain is not especially numerical, but more or less, heavier or lighter, faster or slower is easy and instant. And if you're going in the direction, the vector, the desirable direction you want to go, it matters far less whether you're going at the speed you want, but you could say more acceleration. Now you're talking about speeding it up, but it doesn't have to necessarily be numerical. Just going in the right direction is far more important and relative to your brain. The other one is, and this one is play. Yay, make it fun. Gamify, self-amuse, use destination-aligned reinforcement and reward. So what this means is you make things into a game just for yourself, something that you like to play, like today, me deciding to do a bunch of alliteration. I hope it's entertaining for you, but I did it to amuse me because this is reinforcing and fun and playful for me. It's self-amusing and keeps me going until I get outside validation or outside interest for my work. In the meantime, there's really nobody there, and it will be the same for you or your company. And everybody will ignore you until you're successful. You don't believe me? You should read Creativity Inc., where Steve Jobs and was it John Lasseter, I think? Anyway, the author of Creativity Inc. points it out that Pixar was basically a failed or failing or financially hemorrhaging company for like a decade. And the author also talked about taking 20 years to achieve his dream of going from being able to do basic computer animation to a fully digital animation, which was Toy Story. So during that time, if it's fun, if you can be self-amusing, and you have reinforcement that's aligned, reinforcement and rewards that are aligned with your destination. So example, if your goal is to make more money, you don't say, when I make more money, I'm going to go out and buy something, which is working against making more money. If you're trying to lose weight, just as an example, you do not celebrate doing exercise by eating junk food. If you do, it's not aligned. You could celebrate doing that by having a sweet calorie-free treat, or dancing, or watching your favorite show online or whatever. Will not go against. So make sure that your reinforcements are aligned with your goals and support, or at least don't interfere with them. The next one is progress. And I've been talking about this the whole time, and that is build visible progress every time with respect to time and reps. One full, complete video a day. 50 practice runs on using my Slinky to do the escalator so that I can then entertain my kids' classes. I do one new novel activity every single week, and now it will be twice a week with kids because they're 2 to 5 years old, or maybe even 1 to 5 years old. If I don't introduce something new, I won't keep them engaged. It's a lot more challenging than you think, but it's also very rewarding. Next one is the very end, which is the recommended video on solutions for reducing errors in judgment. I will put the link there, and I will put it in the description. It's based on Daniel Kahneman, Oliver Siboney, and Kassar Sunstein's book, which is Noise, a Flaw in Human Judgment, or something like that title. Anyway, it's a fantastic book, and this will be talking about judgment and effective actions to take based on that book and the research they talk about. So finally, download my gift for you as a reward for watching all the way through this fairly long video. And it's called, so download my Grow Grit guide by clicking on the link in the description. Thank you very much. This has been Crush It Club at 241, Persist, Pivot, and Perspective on your path. My name is Tim B. Green. Bye for now.